Hello, everyone. Welcome to Hyperspace on Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven. I want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening, and a special thank you to webmaster and producer Keith Rowland. And my special guest this evening is Mark Leslie. And Mark Leslie is a Canadian author of horror and speculative fiction. He is the author of the short story collection One Hand Screaming, published in 2004, a collection of short stories and poetry, mostly in the horror genre, and the editor of the science fiction anthology North of Infinity 2, published in 2006, and horror anthology Campus Chills of 2009. Mark is also the author of Haunted Hamilton, The Ghosts of Dundurn, Castle and Other Steeltown Shivers, and Spooky Sudbury, True Tales of the Eerie and Unexplained, co-authored with Jenny Jelen. And his website is www.markleslie.ca. And please welcome Mark to the show this evening. And Mark, how's it going?
Oh, it's excellent. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be back on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. It's good to hear your voice, and it's nice to have you back on again. I know you've been busy, and let's talk about your new books you have out.
Oh my goodness, it's been a busy year. 3 books out this year. So
wow, congratulations! That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So I self-published one. I put a thriller out in July called Evasion, and I was not expecting to do that. That just kind of came out by accident.
Nice.
Tomes of Terror, my latest nonfiction paranormal exploration, which is haunted bookstores and libraries around the world. That came out in September. Just came out a couple weeks ago. And my first horror novel, I, Death, is coming out from Atomic Fez later in October.
Sweet. That's awesome. Well, congratulations. And those are available on Amazon.com?
Definitely, yeah. They're all available on Amazon as well. Tomes of Terror has actually been picked up by a number of bookstores in the U.S. and in Canada. I was delighted to see walking into, for example, Chapters is a Canadian chain very similar to Barnes & Noble. And pretty much every town I've visited, I've walked in, I've seen a full pocket of Tomes of Terror there. And I guess because it's about bookstores and libraries, there's a pretty good chance bookstores may be excited to carry it. So that one might even be at a bookstore or library near you, as well as on Amazon.
Excellent.
And other online booksellers.
Excellent. What was the third one you mentioned again?
I, Death,
okay.
which is it's my first full-length horror novel, which is coming out in just a few weeks. It's also actually I have been rolling it out for free on wattpad.com, chapter by chapter, so that by the time the book comes out, I think about 80% of the novel you'll be able to read for free. But my publisher has given me full permission to make it available on that platform, just as a way to generate some buzz and excitement.
Excellent. This is wonderful. Well, I want to discuss all three. Just kind of give us a teaser insofar as what they entail. So I guess we can start with Evasion. Is that right?
Yeah, Evasion.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that one and what guided you to write that book and what sparked your interest in writing about that storyline.
It was interesting because I had already I knew I, Death was on track for 2014. Tomes of Terror was going to be, and I thought, okay, two books this year, that's good. I'm pretty excited. And then I participated in NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, last November 2013. I'm the director of self-publishing and author relations at Kobo, which is kind of like Canada's version of Kindle. It's an ebook company, and we were sponsoring NaNoWriMo, and so I had a team of people who participated in it. So I thought, well, if we're going to sponsor it and tell writers this is a really great way to try to do a first draft of at least 50,000 words in November, I should at least lead by example. So I signed up. I had no idea what I was going to do. And then I took this short story idea that had been kicking around, and I wrote Evasion during NaNoWriMo. So the premise was my father had died about 12 years ago. And right after he died, I kept thinking I saw him places. I would be at a train station and I would see a man across the tracks who looked just like my dad, or I was driving on the highway and I'd look at the guy driving the car beside me and, oh my God, that's my dad. And the mind does this, it's wishful thinking. It's like, oh, if only he was still alive. But then the premise was, well, what if it was him? What if for some reason he was actually still alive and everyone was led to believe that he had died? Why would that be? So my novel opens up with a son who had seen his father 18 months earlier, even though he had died a couple years before that,
Mhm.
and is convinced he's still alive. So he's hacking into the hospital system to see if he can learn anything about, the death and any of the medical records or anything. And he gets called in by his boss as the novel opens. His boss calls him into the office, asks him to close the door, pulls out a gun, shoots at his head, misses, and then Scott, my main character, basically gets away. And at that point in time, the first person to encounter him is a security guard, and he's like, "Oh my God, my boss has gone nuts! He's trying to kill me!" And the security guard pulls out his gun and takes a shot at him too. Fortunately, he's also a bad shot. So basically, Scott is running because every single person he meets is trying to kill him.
Mm.
And he believes it has something to do with him being on to the fact that with the faking of his father's death. So
Mhm.
that's Evasion. So
Wow, that sounds great.
yeah, it was like 55,000 word novel,
Awesome.
and I posted it to Wattpad. Wattpad being a place where you can make works available completely for free for people to read. And I entered. They had they basically said if you post your NaNoWriMo novel here and tag it NaNoWriMo 13, there's a chance to win $1,000. And I thought, well, this is good. I could use that to pay for an editor for self-publishing this. And I'd forgotten about it. I didn't win the contest, but I posted it there, forgot about it. People were reading it and they were making comments, and it was cool. And then I received an email from somebody at Wattpad who said, I read your thriller Evasion. We really like it. We want to feature it on, and I remember on May 26th, and I think I got this email early April. So, in a month and a bit, they wanted to publish or promote it on their thriller page.
Hmm.
And so I rushed out, got an editor really fast, was able to revise it because it was basically the first draft I had posted. And when it got featured, I got a ton of reads. At this point in time, I think I have 112,000 reads of the novel on Wattpad, and the two most common questions were, "Oh my God, this was great! What's next? Is there a sequel?" And the other one was, "Oh my God, I love this! Where can I buy it in print?" And
Nice.
so that prompted me to decide, well, if that many people want to buy it in print, I might as well make one available. So I ended up self-publishing it in July of this year, and that was not planned. It just kind of happened. The fates.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it was a fun little way to get a book out there.
Yeah, no kidding. It sounds like it'd be a good screenplay too.
I think so. I mean, I imagine it's kind of like it's very Die Hard-esque,
Hmm.
where he opens up and he is in a building at the beginning of it, trying to
Mm.
get away from people who are after him. So yeah,
Awesome.
it's sort of it's not a sci-fi thriller. It has a slight science fiction aspect to it, but very very mild, more of a thriller.
Hmm.
So I don't even tag sci-fi on it. But once you read it, you go, oh yeah, there's the little bit of science that he's talking about.
Hmm. Yeah, sounds fascinating. Okay, so I've got a lot of reading under my belt right now. I'm gonna have to play catch up. So, and Tombs of Terror. Let's talk about that one. That sounds awesome as well. Now, you talked about this one before when I have interviewed you before. I think it was before it was out, if I'm not mistaken. But the haunted bookstores and libraries, wasn't that something you were working on when we
Oh
talked last?
yeah, that was my passion. I mean, I am such a book nerd. It's not even
Me
funny.
too.
And I mean, I've been a bookseller for over 20 years. I've worked, in various aspects of the book industry, been a writer, my entire life. And so the thought of combining my passion for creepy ghost stories and bookstores and libraries, I mean, the two most wonderful places in the universe that you can imagine yourself in. This was really it feels like the book I was born to write. And again, like Haunted Hamilton, which is the city of Hamilton in Hamilton, Ontario, and Spooky Sudbury, which is the hometown I grew up in Northern Ontario, there had never been a book focused on ghost stories of those locales. And even though I had found several great ghost stories in other books about haunted locales that included libraries or bookstores, there was no single volume that collected them together.
Hmm.
So this was truly a lot of fun and a project I did not want to end. I was delighted when my editor at Dundurn said, we're going to cut a couple of the chapters because we'll probably use it in Tomes of Terror too, which was really
Nice.
exciting I was like, good, I get to work on something like this again.
How fun. Yeah, no kidding. That's awesome. So in Tombs of Terror, now where did you find these haunted bookstores? Did you get a lead from somebody, or how did that work?
It's a combination of just when I'm reading other books, I will make a note of something that I read about, or even if it's just an allusion to something, I make these little notes and I throw them into a file folder. And so over as I was doing stuff for Haunted Hamilton and Spooky Sudbury, if I encountered a story that was really cool, but I couldn't use because it wasn't about Sudbury or Hamilton, or even if it related to, library or bookstore, because, I'm always thinking 2 or 3 books ahead. I'd make a note of where I found it, what the source was, and then I could go back to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I used probably maybe 20 different books that I had made notes that had, chapters about haunted bookstores. I dug into newspaper archives, and there were some great online listings, and I actually referenced them at the back of the book, the Encyclopedia of Haunted Libraries. And so, I found the list and learned a bunch of the locations there, and then dug in and said, okay, now I'm going to research this place. I also had an open call on my website for people to share stories. So sometimes people would just share a location without any details, and that would just be sort of a tip for me to go check it out. And other times people would share a personal story, in which case, I asked them, can I email you for more information? Do you want to be anonymous, or do you want to be referred to as under your real name? And the libraries, in particular, the libraries I had contacted, because, some of them even have notes on their website that indicate, yes, this is a haunted library. I mean, one of them has a webcam, ghost cam, the very first ghost cam, which is the Willard Library in Indiana, in Evansville, Indiana. And I just love their website, so I contacted them and said, oh my God, tell me more about the Gray Lady ghost, and tell me more about this cool ghost cam. And so they even sent me some pictures that I could use in the book too. So it was just so much fun, because, doing stuff with bookish people is always fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So can you give us some examples of some of the hauntings that were that people have cited in these libraries?
Yeah, so that library is the Gray Lady ghost that's seen in that library. The Mary Read Library,
Mm-hmm.
which is associated with the university, and I'm trying to remember where is the Mary Read Library is it in Ohio? I'm trying to remember where it is. It's in Denver, Colorado,
Ta-da!
close to someone's stomping grounds. And it's Mary Read, who Mary D. Read, who the building was named after, was a um, family member of the benefactor for the building, and she is seen in the Renaissance room. What the thing I loved about this is, a student was there late at night with his girlfriend. He was waiting for her, so he's wandering around, just kind of like, oh my God, when's she gonna leave? And he walks into a room where the lights are off, flips the switch on, and she's sitting in the dark reading. When the light comes on, she stands, puts the book down, looks at him, and starts walking towards him, and that's when she disappears. And there's multiple sightings like that, where people would walk into a room where there were no lights, and she was sitting there reading in the dark. I mean, so that my original title for that chapter was called Reading in the Dark, but my editor said, okay, enough with the play on words, just call it Reading in the Dark.
Mm,
Jack Kerouac's ghost at Haslam's bookstore in Florida. I love the thought, having been a bookseller, and there are stories of Jack Kerouac when he retired and moved down to Florida, or retired when he moved down to Florida later in life, or later in his short life. He was used to go into the bookstore and be one of those obstinate authors who would get mad when his book was not shelved at eye level. In alphabetical order, sometimes someone's got to be on the bottom shelf, and someone's got to be on the top shelf. So he would move his books around, and the managers would get mad at him. Apparently, after he died, his books were continually moving on their own, or sometimes they would just fall off the shelves.
wow.
And the belief was that he was still there, still upset, and continuing to enact on that. And that was kind of a fun one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it sounds like they're fairly decent insofar as ghost behavior goes, and etiquette, I guess. So have you come across any ghosts that were a little bit more reckless?
A little bit more reckless? No, you know what the thing is there was no. I called it Tomes of Terror, completely for the alliteration. But there's nothing truly blood curdling where the ghost kills someone or anything like that. It's usually a tragic tale of somebody who died on that spot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like the child who gets bitten by the dog in the home that got converted into a bookstore afterwards, and the ghost of the child was seen during a student parade down the street, waving from the second floor window to the people in the parade
Mm.
who who talked about it and is like, no, there's nothing on the second floor. It's just storage. And so it's interesting to see tales like that.
Yeah.
There's um, one of the sort of non-ghost story ones was in Lincoln City, Oregon, when I was actually there for a writers conference with Dean Wesley Smith and Christine Catherine Rush, and I was talking to Dean and Chris and some of the other writers that were there about, well, what are you working on now? And I said, well, I'm compiling this list of ghost stories about bookstores and libraries, and Carrie Hughes, who's an editor, was there and said, oh my God, you have to call Diana, the manager of Bob's Beach Books. You got to go. So she called up Diana right there and said, "Oh my God, Diana's going to be at the store tomorrow afternoon. You got to go visit her." So I went down to the store and interviewed her about the portal.
Mm.
And the cool thing about this was she's working in this bookstore. And so Bob's Beach Books, Lincoln City is it's a touristy town, so a very small population that, quadruples in size during tourist season. And
Mm-hmm.
Bob's Beach Books is right downtown. It's a beautiful little bookstore. It's small enough that you've got the desk, the cash desk is right by the front door. And there's basically only one way into the store, and that's past the cash desk. And Diana's working there one afternoon, and a lovely older couple comes in. They look very scholarly, like he's got the elbow patches. He looks very professorial, and they nod at her, and she asks if they could use any help, and they decline. They move off into the bookstore. But 20 minutes later, she notices them still wandering around, so she goes over to ask them, and they said, "Well, the energies guided us here. This is where we were told the portal should be." And she says, "The portal? What's the portal?" "The portal to Lemuria."
Mm.
And she's like, "Okay, the portal to Lemuria. All right." And then they argue about maybe it's under the stairs or whatever. And she's like, "If you need help, I'll just be at the front cash desk." And then later on, they never left the store. And when it was time to close, she went into the back of the store to go, let them know the store was closing, and couldn't find them. They'd actually disappeared.
Hmm.
And so,
Wow.
yeah, one wonders if they were real and had just been there, or they actually did find the portal, and now they're in the legendary city of Lemuria, which exists in the Pacific or Indian Ocean.
Right. Yeah.
So
That's
that was a fun.
wild. Yeah. That's what's interesting is if they're looking for a portal, it reminds me of Doctor Who. Just go in and find a little
Oh,
portal somewhere and transfer out. Did they appear? They must have appeared physical then, not necessarily like an apparition.
No, they appeared physical. They were two
Mm.
live people in her store,
Wow.
and so I asked her, like, have they ever come back? Have
Hmm.
they ever show up again?
Yeah.
She says no, and this was about a year and a half ago. So that was one of the fresh stories that I got directly from the manager. A lot of times it was secondhand stories that I was able to pick up, but it was always fun when I could talk to people directly.
Right. And what was the impression you received when you walked in these areas? Did you get a vibe of anything?
I didn't get any sort of vibe because she was with customers when I first got there, and I just went in and I just checked out the bookstore, and I mean I bought this beautiful hand carved wooden sort of book jewelry box.
Nice.
Um, and I just loved the store. I thought it looked great. I took a bunch of pictures, and then when I chatted with her afterwards, I chatted with her about it. But I didn't sense that I was gonna walk into any portal or anything.
Yeah, that's fun. Well, it sounds like a great research, just kind of traveling around and going from bookstore to bookstore. That sounds
Oh God,
fascinating.
that would have been fun if I got to do that the whole
Yeah,
time.
that's what I would like to do. Yeah, for sure. So some of these hauntings, it seems like they take place more so in the daytime than at night. Would that be right?
Some of them are in the daytime, some of them are in the night. I mean, one of the night stories comes from Vancouver, British Columbia. It's the University of British Columbia Library.
Mm-hmm.
And the tale happens on a dark and stormy night, which is a perfect setting for a ghost story. and a young man and his girlfriend were on their way to the library to study. And they got into a huge argument, at which point she got him to stop the car and got out and said, I'm going to walk the rest of the way. And as the tragic story goes, she was actually struck by another vehicle and died and never made it to the library.
Hmm.
And so male drivers driving alone on rainy nights, heading down that same road on the way to University of British Columbia, pick up a hitchhiker who silently gets into the car, hands them a note that just says UBC Library. She gets in the back seat, and then she disappears. And so that's one of the dark and stormy night ghosts that appears, and she never does ever get to the library, unfortunately.
Wow, she just vanishes in the vehicle?
Yeah, she just disappears. They turn back, and she's gone.
Well, that's interesting. You know, I've heard stories like that before too, with ghosts like that hitch and then they kind of just dissipate.
Those poor hitchhiking ghosts never can catch a break, can they?
Doesn't seem like it. Well, you know, the one, I guess there was one that had drowned and she used to leave like water. I don't know if you
in the
remember her or
car.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great story.
Yeah. There's a lot out there, a lot of traumatic events that have happened. What's the history with that area over there around the Vancouver area? Is there a traumatic energetic associated with the area that would actually open up a portal for spirits?
On the West Coast, I mean, I could imagine that. I mean, there must be some Native American energies in terms of, is the last vestige of untouched, or you know what I mean, unabused land that was sacred. That was to the people who were indigenous to the land, as opposed to the white men who came in and kind of destroyed what they had. So I can imagine that the energies associated just with the turmoil of what that can mean, that there's got to be some significance there. And I mean, not to mention the turmoil of, as people moved west, the pioneers was very dangerous. I mean, they're moving away from civilization, and they're moving into the wild. There's got to be a lot of trauma associated, with when you think about crossroads and you think about just the unknown that was always at the forefront when you were moving into moving west in North America.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think we've discussed a little bit about the Bigfoot. Wasn't there a Bigfoot sighting up there not too long ago?
Yeah. Yeah, and in Canada, Bigfoot is often referred to, Sasquatch is often a term that's used in Western Canada. Yeah, definitely. That would be a great place to talk about. I mean, the Rocky Mountains, right? It's along the same range of the Bigfoot sightings, so that's quite intriguing.
Yeah, what's interesting is, have you ever encountered anything like that at all?
A Bigfoot or anything like that?
Yeah, a Sasquatch or anything?
I'm always terrified when I'm in the woods. I'm always looking over my shoulder, and I'm not afraid of bears or wolves or coyotes or any other creature like that. I'm worried that Bigfoot's going to get me. That's the thing that. But no, I have not yet encountered Bigfoot, unfortunately, or any sort of Loch Ness type monster in the popping out of the water or anything like that.
Well, they're pretty smart, from what I understand. They tend to evade people.
Stay hidden.
Yeah, and you're in a lovely area, by the way, where you live. It's just beautiful up there. It's a little bit more peaceful. I would think it's a little more peaceful than it is here in the U.S. right now. But insofar as UFOs goes, we touched on these a little bit before on a previous show, but I noticed that some of the UFOs and the anomalies of UFOs actually connect in with water over there. Is that correct?
Yeah, and in particular, where I'm actually doing this interview from right now, which is Sudbury. Sudbury itself, with the nickel mines in Sudbury, was a hotbed of UFO activity, particularly in the 1970s. I mean, Sudbury's also known for water. It's Rainbow Country is the tourist the title of the tourist area here because of the amount of waterfalls and water. And I mean, Sudbury, the city of Sudbury, for example, has the world's largest freshwater lake in a downtown core. So it's very much about water, and I mean, we're right north of the Great Lakes. So, but yeah, the 70s, it was absolutely crazy. The 50s, 60s, and in particular the 70s, Sudbury was the place to be if you wanted to spot a UFO.
That's so interesting. And then it kind of tapered off over the years?
Yeah, I think it was 1976 was when there were actual 3 different police divisions that had reported UFOs in conjunction with a radar over Falconbridge, which is the mine. And the fighter jets from Colorado, they actually were sent to intercept the three unknown objects that were spotted on the radar and simultaneously confirmed by police dispatches. And that was a huge thing in '76. And you talk to people who, I mean, I was quite young then, and I don't remember
Mm-hmm.
what happened. But when I talked to people about that, when I was doing the book signings in Sudbury, they said, "Oh my God, yeah, I remember that. It was in the it was in the news. It was like what are these fighter jets doing above the skies in Sudbury, like U.S. Fighter?" And it is quite interesting documentation on that. And then it was in sort of the 80s and 90s, it kind of petered out a little bit. It kind of got to be less reported.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure why that was. I tried to look at it from a cultural standpoint as well, to see were the things going on in the culture of the day that would lead people to interpret something that they see not as a UFO but as something else.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's always an interesting thing to look at.
Very much so. Yeah, I agree. And what about today? I mean, I know that America has a lot of sightings here and there. How's everything over there in Canada? Do you guys get a lot of sightings as well?
Yeah, there are actually a number of really great groups. Like there's a Paranormal Northern group specifically based in Sudbury, and Mitch runs that, and he wrote the introduction for Spooky Sudbury, and he still posts to his website amazing footage that people continue to send in, and firsthand reports. There was a video I found online that was in Northern Ontario from just a couple winters ago, and it was a family that had been driving, and there was these incredible giant barefoot prints in the snow, like a Sasquatch or Bigfoot type creature in the snow along the side of the road. And they were gigantic,
Hmm.
barefoot, and it was February, so tons of snow on the road. It was pretty cold. I can't imagine. Well, I can't imagine anyone with feet that big, but walking around in bare feet that time of year
Mm-hmm.
be a little bit. And it was great. So there are sightings like that continue. And when I do book signings in particular, I was just doing one this last weekend, and I mean, people are very forthcoming. When they approach me at the table and they say, "Well, actually, I've got to tell you something weird that happened." At which point, I usually pull out my pen and say, "Okay, may I use this in my next book?"
Nice. That's great. Yeah, that's good. People are opening up to you. That's
Yeah,
really
it's really
nice.
it's really because I guess I mean they realize that I have an open mind,
Mm-hmm.
and that I'm not gonna shake my head and think that they're crazy or anything like that. So they feel more comfortable sharing a story like that
Oh,
with me.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think everybody's getting switched on in one form or another, and then we're all becoming that multidimensional being we talk about so often. So, what happened when the fighter jets? Just to go back a little bit here, when those fighter jets intercepted the UFOs, what exactly happened? Did they shoot at them, or did they kind of just vanish? What happened to those UFOs?
Well, according to the official report that was released, there was nothing there. They got there, couldn't find anything exactly where they had shown up. Like they just disappeared. There was documentation that has been blacked out. And in part of my research, and it might have been on Mitch's site that I found it, where there's like 40 pages of description of what happened that morning,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of it has got the black lines through it. So you're like, what did they say there? What were they talking about? And
Right.
and that's classified. So that to me is more interesting than the fact that okay, they got there and nothing was there. Okay, that's the official report, but they got there and what were they saying to one another that we can't see here?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unless they were just telling dirty jokes, and the Air Force just didn't want anyone to read it. But I find that more intriguing, the fact that there was something happened. There were pieces of dialogue. There were things that were, in the report that were blacked out and we don't have access to. So that leads me to believe that maybe did they actually find something, and did they put out the official report just to alleviate people's fears or worries? I
Yeah.
mean, at the time it could have been, fear of the Russians or something like that, that was leading people. That's why those fighter jets would come, because, oh my God, the Russians are going to invade us from Canada,
Hmm.
or something like that.
Right.
But
Yeah.
very intriguing.
Yeah. Highly suspicious, without a doubt. Yeah, you're right about that with those little markers. Yeah, everything's kind of blacked out and edited. It's quite amusing, actually. Yeah. So the other book you're writing, or you wrote, or actually is on its way to be live, right? In October, did you say? Wait a
Yeah,
second. I Death?
Death.
Okay, that's really cool. So where'd you get the title for that one?
Well, in all honesty, so it's about a teenager with a death curse. So
Mm.
he is basically 17 years old. He's blogging about the fact that every single person he befriends or loves or comes close to dies. Therefore, he has a death curse.
Wow.
And I always loved the title I, Robot, Isaac
Yeah.
Asimov, and I just
Hmm.
love the concept of that. And I thought, okay, well, I Death, so I'm just going to riff off of something I quite love, and I went with that. And I Death was actually originally, this is kind of funny, is I was in grade 10, and I Death was a 1,000-word short story I wrote for a English assignment, just a writing assignment where we could just write anything we wanted. And we had an hour in class just to do anything we wanted. And I wrote the story, I, Death, which was a 1,000-word suicide note of this young man with a death curse.
Wow.
And that was it. And then it kind of evolved from there. I mean, I can tell you the crazy story if you want.
Well, yeah, I'd like to hear more about it. It's fascinating, and it amazes me how you come up with these stories.
Well, I think I'm always focused on the macabre. I when I see a shadow, I don't just see the shadow. I see the creepy things that could be hiding in the shadow.
Hmm.
So,
That's
um,
great.
this particular one, I mean, I wrote the story. I thought it was really, really fun. It was pretty short. I think I might have sent it to a few horror markets. Hadn't sold it. And then a few years later, when I was in university and I was supposed to be studying for an exam, instead of studying, I thought I would write the sequel. What happens next? What happens if he can't kill himself? What would happen? And I wrote a story and I called it Sin Eater. And the concept was that he's able to use his power and try to use it for the good of society rather than just killing people haphazardly. Maybe he can use it like a superhero. And that was the premise for the short story. And that short story was about 6,000 words. And I quite liked it, but I wasn't able to sell it anywhere.
Mm.
And then it was about 2005, 2006. I was looking at the two stories, and I really liked Peter O'Malley. I really liked that character. I really liked his girlfriend Sarah, because he was in the suicide note. He was bemoaning the fact that the love of his life had just dumped him, as happens to 17-year-old boys all the time. And uh, I thought I would rewrite it, and it ended up becoming about 30,000 words. And I released it in blog format, and I rolled it out live in 2006. I started it in January, and I finished the blog in October. And I actually did it as a live blog from Peter O'Malley, and people were following along, commenting on it. And I actually had a disclaimer that said, "This is a work of fiction. It's made to look like a real blog, but it's a work of fiction." And I had a lot of people try to contact Peter and talk him off the wall, like off the edge of the bridge or the cliff,
Mm.
because they thought it was a real young man who was going through all this,
Wow.
and it was just wonderful of these people to reach out to him.
Hmm.
But even though I had the disclaimer pretty bold, they obviously missed it. So I sent them a note saying, "Thank you so much for your concern. Peter's not real. This is a story I'm telling. I'm telling it in this format." And then when I finished that, I actually used the commenters. So most of the commenters eventually realized that Peter wasn't real, that he was fiction, and so they played along as if they were real people blogging to Peter.
Hmm.
And at one point in time, Peter meets he loves his English teacher, and she gets in a terrible, tragic accident. And so a supply teacher comes in to replace her for the rest of the year, and he absolutely adores this teacher. And I modeled this teacher on every awesome teacher I ever had. His name was Mr. Robinson, and the kids called him Robbie because he was that cool teacher. And I modeled him after every cool teacher I ever had, and the character that Robin Williams played in Dead Poet Society, John Keating.
Mm.
And I even had Robbie perform the scene out of Dead Poets Society and mention that that's where it's from,
Mm-hmm.
and made the kids do the thing where they stand up on their desks so they can see the world in a different viewpoint. And and at one point in time, I broke the third wall and I left a note for my readers and I said, listen, Robbie, I love him to death, and he was supposed to be a bit character, and he became so much bigger as the story went on. Robbie's gonna die. It has to happen that he dies. But I can't decide whether he should die a hero or a villain. Is he actually a good guy, or is he kind of like, the way Snape was portrayed in the Harry Potter books and movies,
Mm-hmm.
where you're not sure if Snape is a good guy or a bad guy?
Right.
And so I sort of had alluded to things about Robbie, and so you weren't sure if he was a good guy or a bad guy. Um, and then my readers told me whether or not Robbie would die a hero or a villain, and so I wrote it to what they wanted,
Mm.
and came up with what I thought was a really amazing scene that people got really mad at me when they're reading the book now. They got really mad when Robbie dies,
Oh,
but
wow.
it was really great because it was a very interactive experience. And then I sold it to a publisher. And on top of the blog, I guess the first 75% is the blog, and then it's a couple different perspectives as the story continues on to the bitter climax.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's wonderful, and I love the way it's interactive. I think that's so cool.
Yeah, the blog comments actually, I edited some of them and I changed people's names from their real names to fake names. But most of the comments, probably about 80% of the comments, were completely unedited and added into the book.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, I mean, I changed some things to protect the innocent, but yeah, I left them in because it was real. This was real stuff that people were sharing.
Mm-hmm.
I even killed two people in the novel that were part of. I was raising money for the Hamilton Literacy Society, and people. There was an auction to buy the chance to become a character in this book and get killed by Peter by becoming his
Wow.
friend. So yeah, and that was and they those two people now it was online in 2006, and now that it's come back in print and ebook format, now they get to die all over again in 2012. Because
Wow.
2006 and 2012, the dates lined up perfectly. Um,
Interesting.
with the the 18th of January is the 18th of January 2012. So that worked out nice. So
Mm-hmm.
when Ian, my editor, and I were going through it, we didn't have to redo all of those.
Oh, right.
you know, last Wednesday. Oh no, that's last Thursday now. So because it's a diary, so it's dated, so you have all the dates. And I thought, oh God, when I go to update this, is going to be crazy.
Wild. I wonder what happens to the lives of the people that are interacting with it. Have they ever contacted you with some mysterious happenings?
No, I know some of them. Actually, I became friends with some of them after this. So we stayed in contact, which is kind of cool. So, I mean, part of it was, hey, do you mind if I just use your real name as the comment? Oh, yeah, sure, that's great. So that was kind of fun. Um, no, I not that I'm aware of. I haven't
That's
had
good.
them contact me about any real life odd situations. Fortunately, because what happens in the novel is not all that happy, and
Hmm. Right. Yeah, it's interesting though when you put things out to the universe, you never know how it's going to come back. So, are you going to do another interactive blog like that?
I'm thinking about it. I really liked the experiment. I really enjoyed the fact that I knew key milestones in the story, and I knew how that blog was going to end.
Mm-hmm.
But there were a lot of details I didn't know, and I write to deadline a lot, and I loved knowing that there were people hanging to find out what happened next, and I hadn't even written it next. So, I mean, I was writing it live. There's even certain moments in the story where I actually got sick, like I got a really bad flu, and I couldn't even sit up, so I couldn't even continue writing the story. So guess what? Peter gets the flu and can't write on his blog for a
Oh.
few days. So it was kind of funny how that happened, that
Mm-hmm.
interactivity. I love the experience, and so for NaNoWriMo this year, so in just a few weeks in November, I'm going to be writing the sequel to Evasion. But what I'm going to do is rather than write the first draft and keep it hidden to myself, I'm going to, during the month of November, I'm going to post each new chapter as I write it live on Wattpad, because that's the platform that Evasion has a huge following. So for everyone who loved Evasion, here's the sequel you've all been asking for. This is
Nice.
the raw, unedited first draft. As I write it that day, it gets posted.
Cool.
Um,
That's
so
wonderful.
that'll be fun. So then people can comment on it, and based on their comments, because I mean, I have a vague plot outline in mind as what's going to happen. But if people comment and really particularly like something, well, I might just give them more of what they like.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love it. Yeah, I'm going to have to start following that for sure. I get so busy and I try to keep track of everybody, and I swear it's just like time flies in the illusion so quickly.
Which you need a cloning machine.
I do. Oh, well, be careful. Yeah, I do, don't I? For sure. So about the curses, do you believe in curses?
Uh, yeah. Well, you know what? There are some stories that are just too much to be coincidental.
Hmm.
Um, you think about certain curses, and you think about there's just certain people that you know that have had pretty much anything bad that could happen has happened to them, and you wonder what elements of the universe are driving this to happen to them.
Hmm.
I I think curse stories are always fascinating. The Egyptian curse, where you disturb the tomb.
Hmm.
I mean, superstitions play such a powerful thing. I mean, could you meet anyone who breaks a mirror and doesn't worry about the next 7 years?
So
Um,
true, isn't it?
Even in the rational light of day, a mirror gets broken. Don't tell me you don't think about it at least for a split second and go, "Oh no, oh God." So that means 2021, I'll be free and clear again. Um,
So true.
so
Where do you think all that came from? The
that
mirror.
superstition.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I thought, I believe, and I'm speculating here, but did that not come from the fact that there was a belief that spirits could be captured in the mirror, that when it wasn't just reflecting back, but it was taking something?
Right. Well, I've
And
heard that
so
too. Yeah.
you're releasing the evil spirits that were captured by the mirror. Is that where that comes from?
That makes a lot of sense to me. I have heard that, so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Possible. Yeah. Well, I can understand that. Yeah, you're unleashing something for sure. Very interesting. Yeah, well, we were talking about talismans the other night. I was talking to my friend about talismans and things, and it is interesting how people still carry on with the superstition, and especially when it comes to cemeteries and ghosts and spirits. Have you ever had a spirit or a ghost kind of hitch a ride with you and follow you home?
Oh my God. I, yeah, I have to tell you a story from Tomes of Terror about that. It
Cool.
hasn't happened to me. I have had a spirit situation that I believe happened, but it was about a man who picked up a used book from a used bookstore, and it was acquired from an estate sale from
Hmm.
somebody's library who had died. And he would wake up in the middle of the night, and he would see this ghost of this man, this image in his bedroom, standing there reading the book in his bedroom. And every night it kept happening, and he finally he went to a priest to see what was going on, and they tracked it down to the fact that the ghost appeared when he brought the book into his home, and so he brought the book back to the bookstore, sold it back to them, and the
Mm.
ghost disappeared from his house. So the ghost hitched a ride on the book and was
Nice.
associated with the book, not the locale. But I haven't had a ghost hitch a ride with with me.
Wow, that would make such a cool Twilight Zone episode. Some of the things you write about could easily make a nice little sci-fi
Twilight.
or yeah, or
Well, it's
something.
funny when I say that I write horror, but most people who read my stuff go, well, "That's not horror," because when they think of horror, they think of Friday the 13th, hack and slash kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And when I say it's like an episode of The Twilight Zone, that's what my stories are like. Then they go, "Oh, oh,"
It
their
is.
eyes light up, and they go, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, it's totally like that. I love it. Yeah, it's amazing. So do you actually you must grasp some of this from people's personal experiences, or is it just part of your imagination?
I mean, people tell you stories, and you're. I mean, I'm always filing things away. I
Hmm.
mean, they may tell me a story that has an eerie element to it that is really neat, and I want to explore it. Or they may tell me a story that's completely mundane and normal, but I derive a story from it. So, for example, a short story that I had written called Spirits, which I think is one of my favorite, my most beloved, from my own perspective, short stories that I've written. And a friend of mine was commenting. We were walking. We were on the bus, going on Bank Street in Ottawa by this old abandoned theater that was closed, and it was a beautiful repertoire theater known to play like great artsy films and just a great place to go. And it was closed, so it was kind of a blow for the arts community when that closed down. And there was a homeless guy that we always saw outside the theater, and she said something to me that was, "What if he couldn't leave because what if his spirit tied him there? What if there was something about that locale that tied him to that building, and that's why he was there?"
Mm.
He wasn't homeless for any other reason than he couldn't leave that spot.
That's
And
interesting.
that inspired the story Spirits, about what if you could leave your spirit somewhere and not be dead, but actually leave your spirit somewhere, and you would be going through your entire life feeling empty because your spirit was still in some other place and it was no longer part of you. It was like one of my favorite quotes from Cicero, which I do use at the opening of Tomes of Terror, is a room without books is like a body without a soul. And so the thought is like, what if your soul or your spirit was left elsewhere from your physical body? Is
Right.
that why some people feel empty?
I think that's very true on so many different levels. That's a lot of truth to that, in my opinion. What about if someone dies? Now, this is a real creepy one. But if they die, say they physically get buried and they can't escape their physical body, and their spirit gets trapped in there and has to witness it decaying.
Oh my goodness, it's eerie.
Yeah, it is, isn't
Um,
it? But what about that? I mean, what if it gets stuck to a point where it can't even get out of its own physical matrix when it's.
oh, that's crazy. Wow.
I hope I don't give you
Um,
nightmares with that.
you have given me nightmares. Actually, one of the creepiest books that I read in the last year was Hugh Howey's, ironically, I Zombie, which
Mm,
was a zombie novel from the point of view of the people who are zombies, and the horror of it, which was completely disturbing, was that the person in the zombie body is still fully conscious and aware of everything that's happening, but has absolutely no control over what they're doing.
mm,
So there they are, tearing their friend limb from limb, eating their brains, like killing them. And they know they're doing it, but they can't control it. And I mean, there's a statement about our society in there that we're walking around like zombies, even though we know better, but
right.
we just can't control ourselves. Maybe with our cell phones looking down as we're walking. But I just that horrified me more than being chased by a loved one who's a zombie.
Right.
Just the thought of that, it's just kind of like you're in your body and it's decaying and you're stuck there.
Right. It's like
Good
being
luck.
trapped. It's wild. Well, anything can happen. In the old days when they used to have the bell, and then they'd bury them to make sure that they were,
Oh yeah, the bell. I love the
uh,
stories of the bell.
yeah, and also the mirror they used to use to make sure that they were actually dead before, they buried
Oh
them.
yeah, yeah,
To
holding
see
the
if the
mirror.
breath would come out.
Yeah,
I guess that's what they were trying to do.
yeah, yeah, because it would hopefully fog the mirror up if they were actually breathing a little bit.
Right. And there's a lot of tales about people being buried alive accidentally and people waking up in the morgue.
Yeah, see that's something that to me is one of my big fears. The concept of getting buried and I'm not dead, like that's
Right. Yeah,
um
or waking up in the morgue and being like, your toe is tagged and
you're like, what the heck, man? Like really, I'm not dead yet.
it's an alternate reality. But yeah, you're an awesome storyteller. I imagine you have a son, right? Don't you have a little
Yeah,
kid?
yeah, I have a
Yeah.
10-year-old.
I can imagine your kid probably loves you when you're telling stories like this with his friends or to his friends and
Well,
yeah.
I have to be careful because there is only one short story, two short stories of mine that my son has read because they were specifically written for a younger audience. But every Halloween, because Halloween is big in our house, every Halloween we decorate to the nines. There's usually a giant graveyard scene on our front lawn with all kinds of creatures and ghouls popping out of the ground and hanging and swinging, mechanized ghosts going back and forth.
Nice.
And we have a Halloween party, so we invite his friends over usually on a Saturday prior to Halloween, and we do all the typical things like the bobbing for apples and the games and pin the tail on the monster and all that. And one of the favorite parts is when I gather the kids downstairs, we turn the lights down, and I tell them some ghost stories. Now, for the kids, I'm very, very careful because my son, like me, is a giant chicken and would have nightmares. He couldn't even watch the first Harry Potter movie because the troll in the bathroom gave him nightmares.
Aw.
So I have to be very, very careful.
Yeah.
So when I tell them ghost stories, they're the funny ghost stories that have a little eerie element, but there's always a funny punchline at the end. Like I'm sure you've heard the story of the ghost of Bloody Fingers.
I don't know if I have.
Shall I tell you the ghost, the legend of the ghost from Bloody Fingers?
Yeah, because Halloween's coming up.
So there's a hotel, and a family is driving, and it's dark, and it's rainy, and it's a gloomy night, and they're tired, and they get to this hotel on the side of the highway, and the father and the mother and the daughter are there, and they said, "Let's just pull over and we'll go in." So they pull into the hotel, and it actually says no vacancy, but they're so exhausted. Maybe that's maybe it's a dirty room or something. We'll see. We'll check. So they check, and the innkeeper says, "Well, we do have a vacancy, but it's the haunted room, so we don't let people stay there." And they say, "Listen, I can't drive anymore. We're going to get in an accident. We're going to die if we stay on the highway. So please, could you, please just have mercy on us and let us. We don't believe in ghosts. We will stay in this room." So they get into the room. It seems like a decent enough room. They all go to bed, and the man wakes up, and he hears this eerie voice. Wakes him up. It's this whisper that says, "I am the ghost of Bloody Fingers." And he jumps up and he runs out the room, forgets about his family. He's so terrified and just goes running down the highway, disappears into the night. The wife hears the door. She wakes up and she hears this voice, "I'm the ghost of Bloody Fingers." She jumps up, she opens the window, and she jumps out and runs, follows her husband down the highway, completely forgets that their daughter's still in the room. And then the daughter wakes up because the breeze comes in from the window. And the daughter hears the voice, "I'm the ghost of Bloody Fingers." And she says, "Want a Band-Aid?"
Oh, that's cute.
So and that's the kind of fun story. It's creepy, it's eerie, oh no, it's scary, and then of course there's got to be a fun punchline that the kids would always get. So that's the kind of story that I tend to share with the kids, and they love it. It could be the same 6 stories every year. Like, "Oh, tell us the one about the now I see you, now I'm going to eat you." Like there's all of the crazy stories that I've told, or the viper is another fun one. So yeah, they quite like that. Even though they've heard them again, they really enjoy the. I guess they enjoy the oral storytelling, which I've always been fond of.
Me too. And it seems like we're kind of missing out on that these days in society with everything being so, technologically advanced these days. So I'm happy to hear you guys bob for apples. I used to do that when I was a kid, and it brings back fond memories. Some of the things you're talking about at your Halloween
Yeah,
party. Just nice
yeah.
things.
Yeah, it's things that I mean. How often do you get to do that? I mean, it's usually isn't it? Well, it's a harvest kind of activity, right?
Hmm.
And that's Halloween is kind of about the harvest as
Oh,
well.
yeah, absolutely. And also honoring the dead with Samhain. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. So that's really nice that you do that. I bet it's lovely. Yeah. Do you get a
Oh,
lot of trick-or-treaters?
yeah, we do get a lot of trick-or-treaters. It's great actually. And particularly because of all the decorations and the fog machine and the lights and everything.
Oh, wow.
It's people will drive their kids just to come trick-or-treat. It's not like we have special treats or anything. They're just standard treats that everyone has.
Hmm.
But it's fun and my wife used to have to tell me to turn the music off because I always had the eerie sound effects and music playing coming out of the garage.
Hmm.
And sometimes just that extra sound effect of music is enough to keep some of the little ones from coming. And
Oh,
they're like, "Oh,
yeah.
I don't want to." Yes, there's like a turn off the music. You're scaring them.
Oh, that's funny. So, do you ever have anything paranormal that's happened on Halloween at your house? Anything that's unusual?
No, I was going to say earlier, I used to be able to say I have never had a paranormal experience that I'm aware of.
Wow.
Um, but not at Halloween. I had something happen this spring when I was in Halifax. I was in Halifax for the Halifax Author Event of 2014. And I was staying at, I think it was the Lord Nelson, which is one of the oldest hotels in Halifax. And Halifax is on the east coast of Canada. Um, and I got in sort of that weird time between lunch and dinner. And I had early breakfast, and Halifax is 2 hours ahead of Toronto, where I was from. And so it was this weird thing where I hadn't eaten since breakfast, but it was like, 2 in the afternoon and I hadn't had lunch and it was this weird sort of thing. And I got into the hotel room. I plugged in my laptop and then I went to plug in my phone. But there's only one plug at the desk. So I went over to the bedside table and I go, oh, there's a plug right in the lamp. So I'll plug my phone into the lamp so I can get a charge. And it doesn't go on. It doesn't ping like when you actually have a power source.
Mm.
And so I went to turn on the lamp. I go, maybe the lamp has to be turned on. The lamp doesn't turn on. There's no light. Reach over to the other side. That the light doesn't work. So I get down on my hands and knees and I look, and there's the power cord that they're both plugged into is unplugged. So that's kind of weird. Okay, maybe the maid was in the room and had done the house cleaning and plugged in the vacuum, unplugged this, plugged in the vacuum, and then forgot. No problem. So I go to plug it in, and it's pretty firm. So I plug it in the wall, and it's a nice firm grip. And I go, okay, probably that's what happened. And I charge up my phone, try and get it like about 50% or whatever, and then go, okay, I'm going to go out and grab late dinner, early or late lunch, early dinner. And I left the light on, and I remember I had my laptop on. Then I came back, and the light was off.
Mm.
And I thought that was kind of weird. It's like 5 o'clock. I checked into my room a few hours earlier. Was housekeeping back in my room? Did they unplug it? And I thought maybe they did.
Mm.
Plugged it in again, no problem. And then I went out for a late dinner, and I got back to the room, and it was still plugged in, so I was relieved. I was relieved to see that. I fell asleep, and I had my phone plugged in again into that bedside lamp, and then in the early morning I woke up, and because I'm a 2 hours time difference, I'm always worried about sleeping past my alarm or anything weird because it was 2 hours earlier for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I go to reach for my phone to press the little button so the time comes up on my phone so I can see. And I see that my battery's at like 20%. And I go, that's weird. It's been plugged in all night.
Wow.
And yeah, and so with the light on my phone, I tip my phone down and I look around the corner of the bed, and sure enough, it's unplugged again.
Mm.
And so here I am imagining somebody crawling into my room in the middle of the night just to unplug the cord, or um, some giant mouse or something tugged on it and pulled it out of the wall, or something did not want that plugged in.
Right.
Now, I'm a big chicken, and I am surprised. I think I got up at that point. I woke up. The next night, I couldn't sleep, and I actually had to drink to pass out because I wasn't able to. I wouldn't have been able to sleep. But I didn't plug it in, and I told myself, something didn't want that plugged in, probably for some good reason. Like it was, a bad thing was going to happen if something was plugged in. So I left it unplugged, and I thought it was trying to tell me, don't plug it in. I'm gonna go with that, and everyone's gonna be happy. And so
Wow.
that was the weird situation that I would chalk up to a paranormal experience because I can't explain it any other way.
Right.
Um, and yeah, but I guess prior to that, this spring of 2014, I used to say I write about paranormal stuff, but it's never happened to me before, and I
Wow.
can't say that anymore.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. You might have attracted that in some form or another. Yeah, that's kind of a paranormal event, if you ask me.
Yeah.
For sure. And with that being said, we're going to head for a break real quick. Everybody stay tuned at Dark Matter Radio Network. We're going to have a 3-minute break here, Mark. So if you need to get a drink of water or anything, we'll be right back, everybody. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody, to Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Solaris BlueRaven, and welcome to Hyperspace. And I'm here with my special guest, Mark Leslie. And Mark, it's great to have you on tonight. And thank you for sharing your incredible spooky stories with us.
Oh, thanks. It's always fun to share spooky stories.
It's just wonderful. Yeah, it's just I love hearing it. I'm a kid at heart. What can I say? So it's nice to hear these stories. So let's see here. Has your mother ever experienced any ghosts since you're spending some time over there?
No, she hasn't. And it's funny. My mom, my mom has always said, "Why can't you write a nice story like a romance?" And I often say, and I say this jokingly because I grew up in Northern Ontario or mid-Northern Ontario, Sudbury, Ontario, and I grew up. My father was an outdoorsman, so fishing and hunting was a big thing, and particularly the weekend that just passed, Thanksgiving weekend in Canada, which is in October,
Mm-hmm.
is which Columbus Day for people in the U.S. Um, is when a moose hunting season opens in this part of the world, and my dad, being an avid hunter, would always get a moose, and the party he was with, they would always get a moose or two, and I always remember this time of year, it gets dark early. I remember going to put my bike away, it's maybe 7:30 at night, so it's pitch black out. Going into the garage to take my bike and put the bike away, and you hear this eerie creaking sound of something swinging, and you smell this overwhelming, horrid sense of smell of blood, and you can see this shape swinging back and forth in time with the sound of the swinging, and these dead eyes glaring at you in the darkness. Of course, it's a dead moose that's hanging upside down in the garage, and you have to, before you bring it to the butcher, you actually have to skin it and you have to bleed it, and the blood has to drain out of it for a significant amount of time before you can properly butcher it. And I always say, whenever they ask why I write scary stories, I always say it's my childhood, of course. That kind of thing I used to see all the time, and
Oh
you
yeah.
wonder why I write horror stories.
No kidding. Yeah, that's pretty wild. Yeah, you call yourself a big chicken, but you do dive into some mysterious waters, so I don't think you're that much of a chicken.
Oh, I didn't have much choice. I was putting my bike away.
Yeah, that's true.
But no,
Wow.
I am a chicken. I am, when my son was little, I was worried he would come into the bedroom and say, "Oh my God, Dad, the boogeyman is here."
Mm.
And thank God his mother was in the house, because if his mother wasn't in the house, that would have been it. I would have been like, "Oh my God, the boogeyman, let's hide," you know. But she would always put reason into it and everything, and she would get rid of the boogeyman. Whereas I would go, actually, no, one thing that did work really really well was he was afraid of monsters when he was little, and we put a sign on his door, and he wrote the sign, "No monsters allowed,"
Nice.
and put that on his door. And he felt that allowed him to sleep, because the rule was no monsters are allowed in your room, therefore you're safe.
Right. Setting a
To
boundary.
which, and that inspired an amazing horror story that I wrote called "No Monsters Allowed," about a
Nice.
little boy who does exactly that. Unfortunately, his room's the only room that's protected in the house.
Mm.
The rest of his family's not so safe.
Is that for adults or children, that book?
That was for adults, actually.
Oh,
But I
wow.
mean, all adults remember the monster under their bed, right?
Hmm.
Don't they? Am I the only one?
No, not at all. Yeah. I like that. That should be for children too, so it gives them
Well,
more.
a young adult story maybe is, it's a
Yeah.
tough one, because it's kind of a disturbing story
Oh,
at
is
the
it?
end. But
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, so the child is safe, but nobody else in the house is when he wakes up the next morning,
Oh, wow.
because the monsters couldn't get into his room, but they could get anywhere else in the house that they wanted to. So you should have put it on the front door.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. So where is that one available? Where are all your books and short stories available?
Well, all of my work is available on places like Amazon and Barnes and Noble,
Mhm.
Chapters Indigo. If you're looking for print, they're available on Kindle and iBooks and Nook and Kobo. If you're looking for ebooks, some of my stories are only available in ebook format right now, because what may have happened is they may have been in print somewhere in a magazine, and I've released them in digital format. So stories like Spirits and even Bumps in the Night, which is for $2.99 it's a collection of 4 tales meant to be told around a campfire. So there were a couple reprints and a couple new ones in there.
Nice.
And yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with that because with digital books in particular, it doesn't have to be 300 pages bound between two pieces of cloth. It could actually be 4 short stories. And in Wattpad.com, the Mark Leslie page has some free short stories you can read. Prospero's Ghost, which is derived from a story I've been telling for 15 years to kids and adults alike about this ghost called Prospero's Ghost, who walks around with The Tempest by Shakespeare in his hand. And he's seen in all kinds of weird places like bookstores and libraries and even theaters. And that was a fun one. So I ended up turning that into a short story with a good friend of mine. And that's available for free, as well as Snowman Shivers, because of where I grew up. Snowmen were a huge part of the landscape, and particularly for Calvin and Hobbes fans, the imagination that Calvin has with snowmen,
Hmm.
my fiction takes on that same sort of bend. I imagine in a story called "That Old Silk Hat They Found," what might actually happen if you put a magic hat on a snowman and he actually came to life. What would actually happen? Could he actually dance and jump and sing? Well, he doesn't have legs. How is that possible? And so it's sort of a dark humor look at the Frosty the Snowman
Hmm.
legend. And again, more Twilight Zone-ish in nature, or dark humor in nature than particularly creepy, but it's also creepy to wonder what it might be like to be that snowman.
Hmm. Yeah, your imagination just goes wild, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
That's amazing. You're a genius. I love it. Yeah. I
Tell
like
me more. Tell me
Well,
more.
I love the bumps in the night. Now, the campfire tales, can you give us a little sample of that?
Yeah, so I mean, one of them is a story called "The Bush People," and again, it's a fictitious story, but it was a story that had been told to me by a friend of mine, J.P. Couvrette, who I went to high school with, and we used to work at Fox Lake Lodge in Northern Ontario. We used to work there on weekends and in the summer, and we would be at one of the cabins on the lodge, and we would be doing maintenance around the lodge and hauling wood and different things that needed to get done. But then we would be staying at the lodge, and of course we'd sit up around the campfire, or we'd be in the bunk beds at night in the dark, and he would tell the weirdest stories, the ghost stories. And I remember him telling this tale that involved the loon, the haunting call of a loon in the night. And the call of the loon was the sound of old Crooked Neck, who was coming back to seek revenge on the people who had hung him. Um, and every time I heard a loon call in the middle of the night, I freaked out because I thought of that story that JP told. Even now, when I'm by myself in the woods and I hear a loon, I don't know if you're familiar with the haunting echo. It sounds like a bittersweet cry in the night, and it's just an eerie sound. And so the Bush People was a story about a young man who's remembering when he was a child being in the woods in the middle of the night and hearing a story around the campfire about the Bush People, who are these people who hide in the shadows of the trees, and at night they capture kids who wander away from their parents. And it was meant to be told in that, don't wander away from your parents, kids, or else the Bush People will get you. And that sort of that there's a moral to this story, and we're going to tell our kids this so they don't knock on strangers' doors or whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
And of course, this young child takes it to heart and has to go out to the washroom in the middle of the night and ends up getting lost. And he hears the call of the loon getting closer and closer, and he is terrified because he feels the Bush People are chasing him through the shadows and coming after him. So it's one of those really fun stories to tell around the campfire,
Nice.
because you can really get people going with that one,
Oh, yeah.
particularly when they're back, they're facing the fire and their back is to the darkness. You can have
Yeah.
all kinds of fun with that story.
Right. Well, there's something to be said about creative visualization and just imagination in general. I hate to think that society's fading away when it comes to imagination, where everything is television. But it's nice to just have conversation without iPhones and just have like a little campfire tale, something so simple as that, that sets the mind in motion. I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, and one of the things, and just to speak for the way this can work with technology, and I've actually seen it work really, really well, is the interactivity that a writer and a reader can have
Mm-hmm.
in an ebook, in the commentary on an ebook, on a blog, podcast comments, even places like Wattpad, where readers can comment and the writer can interact with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that reminds me, in many, many ways, of storytelling's roots, where you would be standing in front of a group of people. And when I tell stories to a group of people, I look for clues in the audience, in their reaction, in their eyes, and what they like and what they hang on. And depending on how they react to certain things, I give them more of that. I want to, they're engaged, so I go, okay, this is good feedback. I'm going to continue with that because you seem to really be liking this.
Mm,
And I did that with my blog when I did iDeath. Oh, you like this? I'm going to give you more of that.
right.
And that's something that if we can try in many ways possible to bring those elements back to the storytelling we do now, we can still have that. I mean, nothing beats the satisfaction of live storytelling,
Mm-hmm.
with a live audience. But there's some elements that can almost come close to that.
Nice. And do you do ghost walks also?
I haven't done ghost walks myself. I've gone on them and I adore them because that's exactly what you get. The best people to do ghost walks are usually amazing storytellers because when you tell a story that you've told 100 times before, there has to be something in the story that fascinates you so that it seems to be like the first time you've ever told the story.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's key because you don't want the guy saying, "Yes, and in 1952, Johnny hung himself here, and from that point on, everybody saw his ghost." Like you want them to tell the story as if this is the first time they've discovered it, and I've got to tell you this. This is so fascinating. And
Right.
those tend to be. I've gone on ghost walks in Ottawa, in Hamilton, in Kitchener, in Niagara on the Lake, and these are all, of course, places in Ontario. But what an amazing sense, not just of the tales, but of the history and the way that the storyteller can wrap the legend up with the historical and the factual,
Mm-hmm.
and and there's some exaggeration, but it's always based on a kernel of truth, and it's always based on some. Uh, I mean, where I live now in Hamilton, the War of 1812 is prominent. There's a lot of stories about the history because a lot of people lost their lives during that war, whether
Mm-hmm.
they were hung for treason, or they were soldiers that died in the field, or they were innocent people who were slaughtered as soldiers came through the town.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure there's quite a marker there insofar as paranormal activity goes. Huh? Would seem like it anyway, for sure. Wow, that's fascinating. And you also drive around with a life-size skeleton, right?
I do.
All right, so
Barnaby.
you're a big chicken, but you'll hang out with a skeleton. Is that it?
Well, he's not real. He's made
Oh,
out of plastic,
oh,
but
he's plastic. Okay.
he's not real. Yeah, he's not a real dead person. But I
It
tell
works.
you, it makes for interesting stories because he's my mascot. So when I do book signings, Barnaby sits beside me. He usually has a T-shirt on with my latest book on the T-shirt because I figure if someone's going to take a picture with Barnaby, then I may as well get some free advertising out of it. And usually he sits beside me, and it does one of two things. If you're there thinking that this is going to be a serious, literary title, or maybe a romance or a western or some other genre that you like to read, you see the guy sitting with a skeleton. If you're not into mystery, thriller, horror, creepy stuff, chances are don't come talk to this guy. Just save your time. The other thing that it does, I mean, and the people who are really into the macabre, then they come and go, "Hey, what's this? Tell me about."
Mhm.
And then the other thing it does is it gives people an opening and witticism. So I mean, a common joke that people will say is, "Hey, guess your buddy's been sitting here a long time, hasn't he?" Or something humorous, and that's an icebreaker, and that works really really well. So I was taking Barnaby to pretty much every event I went to as an author, and even in my role at Kobo, I would take him to demonstrate that you can have a thing that you're known for as an author. That can be your thing. Neil Gaiman, for example, will never be seen not dressed in black. That's his thing. There are different things that you can be associated with you according to your persona. And so Barnaby has been mine for the last 2 years.
Hmm.
And I've even been asked, I'm going to be on a television program in a couple weeks. And again, the host says, make sure you bring Barnaby. I was like, well, of course. Why wouldn't I bring Barnaby? Because you guys like him more than you like me.
Yeah.
But
That's funny.
I was stopped by, do you guys have ride programs in the US?
I think
Like
so. That sounds familiar.
drinking and driving where
Oh,
they check,
yeah. Well,
they,
something similar. Yeah.
where they check, they do spot checks to
Right.
see.
Yes. Yes. Mhm.
So I was coming down. It was last summer for Spooky Sudbury from Hamilton to Sudbury. It was about 1 in the morning, and I was up on Highway 400 heading north, and it was just north of Perry Sound. And I got stopped by a ride program, middle of the highway. Police officers are stopping every single car, and Barnaby sitting in the passenger seat beside me. So I pull up. He says, "Good evening. Have you had anything to drink tonight?" I said, "Nope." And he goes, "How about your friend? Has he had anything to drink?" And like he says it with a straight face, which is kind of funny. And you always, I always worry because I like to joke, but you don't want to joke with police officers. But I thought, this guy seemed to have a good sense of humor when he said, "How about your friend? Has he had anything to drink?" And I said, "Well, yeah," and booze goes right through him. So he laughed at that, which was good. And then he said, "No, no, seriously, what's with the stiff?" And that's when he got a little bit serious. And I'm like, "Well," and I pulled out my book. I go, "I'm going to my book launch. Would you like a free copy, officer?" And of course it was fun. But I love the fact that he now has a really interesting story to tell
Mhm.
about a ride program where they were doing spot checks in the middle of the night about this guy with a skeleton in his car.
Great.
Hopefully he remembers the name of the author in the book.
Oh, yeah.
But when I crossed the border, um, I was going to a conference in upstate New York, which is just across the border, like 45 minutes from where I live. And I brought Barnaby with me, and because I was a guest of honor at Eerie Con.
Mhm.
And so I have my passport, and I hand it to the guy in Barnaby sitting in the seat beside me. And he looks at me. He looks at the passport. He looks at Barnaby. He looks at me. Looks at the passport. He does it about 6 times, and I'm waiting for him to either say a joke or get really upset. Like, what the hell are you doing? And then he just goes, "Do you have anything to declare?" And I went, "Nope." "Okay, go." And I was like, "Oh wow, that was that was really interesting."
Wow. That is wild. Yeah. If it starts talking, I guess they would get nervous, huh?
Yeah, I got to hook. I got to hook something up. I was
Yeah.
tempted when I'm driving on the highway. There are often people who will pass me, and then they'll come back, and they'll take pictures, and then they'll
Great.
go on again. I'd love to. And sometimes when I'm stopped at a traffic light, and usually it's kids or something like that, they like point and laugh, and then of course I lift his hand up and wave at them and things like that.
Nice.
So I've got to come up with some sort of robotics so I can operate that without them seeing my hands.
Wow. Yeah, that'd be kind of neat, wouldn't it? Yeah, that's
It
great. And
might
so,
scare me too.
yeah, no kidding. So, are you actually coming over to the U.S. anytime soon to do more
Uh,
storytelling or book signings?
I'm going to be in Florida for Novelists Inc. As part of my Kobo job, talking to authors. But I am going to be so close to Haslam's that I will be swinging by Haslam's to just say hi to them, probably take some pictures, see if I can feel the ghost of Kerouac.
Mm.
And I'm going to be in Colorado in early 2015 at
Oh, let me know.
yeah. There's a couple different conferences. I go down for the Superstars writing seminars that Kevin J. Anderson runs and Rebecca Moista. They run in Colorado Springs.
Hmm.
And then there's one just north of there that is, and I met this writer in Colorado Springs last year at a conference. And yeah, I think that might be March. I may be going back there twice, which will
Awesome.
be, yeah, I mean, I love that part of the U.S. as well. It's
That's
just
very pretty.
gorgeous.
Although you
Very
live in
gorgeous.
the best place, I think. I mean, Canada's gorgeous. It's just beautiful. Yeah. I think it's a
Lots
little
of
more
beautiful.
peaceful there, you know?
We have less handguns.
Well, there's a lot less everything. I think it's just plain peaceful. Maybe less spirit activity. I don't know. Do you think it's more haunted up there in Canada than it
Well,
is
it's
here?
more. It's definitely more. So take a look at the landmass of Canada.
Hmm.
Now think about the population of Canada is the equivalent of the population of the state of California.
Wow. Yeah.
Across this landmass, and most of the population is along that 49th parallel, like the border to the U.S. where it's warmest.
Hmm.
and not so warm, obviously, in certain climes. But and a lot of it, obviously, is in like the Vancouver area and Montreal and Toronto, big cities like that.
Mhm.
But think about the vast emptiness of what Canada is when you actually look at Ontario, the province I'm from, that 90% of the population is in the lower half of Ontario, mostly close to the Great Lakes, and all of that above is mostly unpopulated.
That sounds beautiful. Yeah.
There's a lot of empty space and eeriness in Canada, but
Mm.
not as many ghosts of dead people because there haven't been as many people here.
Right, but anomalies, maybe UFO, that type of thing, right?
Well, there's a lot of unknown, right? There's a
Right.
lot of unknown wilderness and uncharted. Well, not uncharted because people have been there, but I mean it's mostly vacant space.
Oh, that sounds beautiful and very, very, very peaceful. Yeah, that's so nice. Wow, that's great. Yeah. So what about killer clowns? Have you written about those? Everybody has a paranoia and phobia with those.
I am terrified of clowns. God, they scare me. I'm trying to think. I do not think I have touched upon the killer clown.
Oh, good.
I think Pennywise the clown from It is my favorite
Hmm.
because he was sort of the epitome of the we all float down here. That was a really really good one for me. But no, I haven't done the clown yet.
Hmm.
That's one I should play with.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I know there's some people dressing up as creepy clowns out. I think it's in California somewhere, and they're starting to creep people out in the middle of the night. Don't know what the story is with that one.
Like lately?
Yeah.
Oh wow,
I saw it on Facebook. Yeah, they just look like
that's
creepy little clowns, you know. And I can imagine for people who like have clown issues, seeing something like that at 2 a.m.
oh yeah, no kidding. Oh my God, yeah, that's that. See, that would do it for me. I mean, this. Did you ever read it or see the movie, the made-for-television movie that they did from Stephen King's It?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Pennywise the clown, and there's certain scenes where he's got the bunch of balloons. And I was in first year university, and it's Carleton in Ottawa, and I used to walk across the canal at night when I finished a night class. And I'll never forget because there's scenes in the novel where Pennywise the clown is seen like in the sewer systems and the canals.
Hmm.
And so I'm crossing the canal in the middle of winter, so the water is drained down like really, 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 really low. And I look down into the canal as I'm crossing like the bridge across. This is the locks, the locks that would be part of the Rideau Canal,
Hmm.
and I see a small bunch of balloons floating about midway down in the darkness of the canal. And I immediately think Pennywise the clown from Stephen King's It. I don't think I touched the ground on my way out of there. I don't remember my feet hitting the ground. I just remember I think I picked myself up by my butt cheeks and I was gone. Like I was just out of there. And I don't know what it was, probably whatever, some party or something like that, and the balloons had blown into the thing, and we're just kind of resting there. But I mean, I just remember being so terrified, and I don't think I went back that way until the end of the winter when it started to be light again.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness.
yeah, but that was just one of those moments where I'm like, all right, that's good. I'm not tempting fate. Nope, not going anywhere near this water place at night.
Oh, that's so funny. It leaves an impression. You know, when I was a kid, I used to have this obsession with binoculars. I'd have to have my binoculars wherever I went. And I used to like creep myself out looking at water towers. That was
Water
my
tower.
thing. Yeah, the ones with the legs, you know, the real big ones, the metal ones. For some reason,
Okay,
they would
yeah.
spook me as a kid, but I couldn't stop staring at them with my binoculars. I was a strange kid. But it
Wow.
reminds me of War of the Worlds, too, you know, where everybody gets
Yeah.
creeped out on that type of thing. But yeah, I mean, you
I'm
can.
wondering if you saw that when you were young, and that was an impression
I
that
think I
that
did
stuck with you.
because I can't. I kept thinking it was something like that. You know, it used to weird me out. To this day, I don't really like water towers
And
much.
was it a John Christopher novel, the young adult or young reader that had the tripods?
Oh
Was that
wow, I think you're right
some?
about that. That sounds familiar too.
Because that's when you said the water tower, I immediately thought of that, and I went, "Oh yeah, that was scary." I remember having that read to me.
I'm gonna have to Google that. Yeah, I used to read so many books when I was growing up. Amazing. I wish I had kept all of those books.
Oh yeah, me too. Although I think at the time we probably got most of them from the library or something.
Yeah, I did. But you remember the Book of the Month Club? I don't know if you guys had that there in
Yeah,
Canada.
yeah,
Yeah, we
oh,
used to
yeah,
do that, and I used to get all these cool books every month. You know, and oh, it was so much fun.
Yeah, we had the
Yeah.
Scholastic used to come. There was a little catalog that would come around to our school.
Yeah. I
We
don't
get
know
to
if,
order.
yeah, do you ever remember? I don't think you'd remember it, but it's called the Happy Hollisters. Do you remember that?
No, what was that?
Oh, it's a mystery book. It was this family of kids that were basically always solving mysteries. Nobody remembers that book, and I used to read that whole series when I was a kid.
Oh, see, I was into the Three Investigators. Alfred Hitchcock and the Three Investigators
Oh,
was my
nice.
mystery series. Yeah, and it was always those supernatural things. But then, kind of like in Scooby Doo, you found out it was just the principal put on a mask and was trying to scare everyone out of the school.
Right. Yeah, Scooby Doo was great. I love that one. That's a good one. Yeah, those are good old memories, I swear.
Fun stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And have you ever spent a night in the cemetery?
Are you kidding?
Oh,
No,
come
wait,
on.
no, wait, man. I have friends who go on like stay overnight at the Lizzie Borden house and they go down to the haunted penitentiaries and
Mm.
yeah, I don't I no I don't think I could do it in
No.
all honesty.
That's
I'm
interesting. With the kind of stuff you write, that really amazes me.
but I write it because I believe it. So it's like
Right?
no way, man. Like I'm really cemetery at night. I have I ever been yeah, I've been in a cemetery at night but not for very long.
Hmm.
And yeah, there's just certain places that I'm not. I did I run and I have this app called Zombies Run.
Oh, wow.
Zombies, comma run exclamation point is, and what it is it's a GPS based app that you run and you have your playlist, your music playlist, and between songs, there's a story unfolding where you're runner five, and it's a zombie apocalypse, and you're at your home base and you go on a mission, and they're talking to you in your earpiece saying, okay, runner five, you've got to head here now and pick this up and then there's this story that's being told as you run and you pick up there's random objects as part of the game that you pick up, like a bottle of water, maybe a pair of pants, could be shotgun shells, whatever. And when you get back to your base at the end of the 5K run or whatever, however length you choose to go, um, you can get points. Like you give the water to the housing and you give the band-aids to the hospital and stuff like that. And your population grows. So it's a game. But then there's a setting called random zombie attacks.
Mm.
And in the middle of running, you'll suddenly hear warning zombies 100 meters. And then you hear this breathing and there's rah, and it's in stereo on your headset. And it actually sounds like they're coming up behind you. And then there's also like a heartbeat that gets faster, like the
Jeez.
Jaws theme, as they get closer and closer. And by the rules of the game, you have to run 10% faster for
Hmm.
a full minute, or else the zombies get you.
Cool.
And so the cool thing about this is you're the only one who can hear it because you have the headset on and your GPS. So I may be running through the park, looking normal, la 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 la, and all of a sudden, um, I go, oh crap, and I take off like a shot, and like people be like, "Mommy, what's wrong with that man?" Because they have no idea that these zombies are chasing me.
Right.
Um, but the interesting thing about this is there are times when I usually go for a run at the end of the day,
Hmm.
and just as the sun's setting, there's a park on the Hamilton Mountain that is just this beautiful park, but there's a certain part of the park that is all shaded and under the trees. And as it gets to darkness, I'm always worried that the zombies are going to get me when I'm in that darkest spot because not only is there a big hill at the end that I have to go up while I to get out of the shadows, but I'm always worried. Like I hope they don't get me while I'm in the dark because that's
Mm.
even worse. And it's just one of those eerie things where, even in this normal beautiful park, just with a few shadows and the sun starting to go down, the zombie sound effects do it for me every time. And I know better. There's nothing to be afraid of. I can just rip the headphones off.
Oh,
but
wow.
but boy, do I ever get a good run in when they come after
No
me.
kidding. Okay, so I want this application. So it's called the Zombies Run because I run too. So
Zombies, comma run.
Okay.
There are actually three seasons now.
Cool.
You can get it. I think you get the first one, and the first 3 or 4 episodes are completely free, and then you can buy additional episodes. And I think you can get everything for like 9.99 or some price. But I love the story that they're unfolding and the continuing adventures, the gamification. So you finish your run, and you're just you're catching your breath, and then you go, okay, and I'm going to give the water to this, and I'm going to give the pants to this, and I'm going to give the shotgun shells to this, and your population keeps growing, so it's kind of a game too.
Oh, it's
Uh,
great. I'm sure it improves your running skills. I mean, if you have to kind of push and press at certain points when you're being chased, and you
it's
never
interval
know.
training, right?
Yeah,
And interval training
absolutely.
is
Yes.
really good for you because then, but then the thing I noticed I was doing is if you're going all out and you're running really really fast and trying to do really really good, like get a good time, then when they come after you, that 10% is really hard when you're
Hmm.
already moving pretty fast.
Oh, no kidding. And you're at a pretty
So,
good elevation, aren't you?
no, we're okay. Not too bad.
Okay.
Where I am.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds like a
Yeah,
blast.
Colorado would be a little bit trickier with the lack of oxygen and stuff.
Yeah, I mean it's good, but it's actually the good part is if I train up here and then I go down to like sea level, I'm like really strong. It's
You,
just training up in the mountains. Yeah, it builds you up.
you go to Boston and you can kick butt, right?
Yeah, at least for a while. I've got to get that though. That's great. Yeah.
It,
So
it is a really fun app.
yeah, so it's an iPhone application. Is that what it is?
Yeah, iPhone and Android, and Six to Start is the name of the company. And Margaret
Oh.
Atwood, actually, Canadian literary author, actually makes a guest voice appearance in the second season
Mm.
because she's a friend slash fan of Naomi Alderman, who's one of the co-founders of the company.
Wow.
And Naomi is a writer, and she has written zombie stories and genius writer. Absolutely adore that app and what they've done.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Well, living here in the U.S., you never know when that's going to come in handy. We have a lot of, I think we have more zombies here that are potential zombies anyway. So
Yeah, and some of them are running for office too.
I'm telling you, oh, I may be heading up to Canada soon. Don't know. So you still need a
But,
passport to get in and out of Canada to the United States. Is that right?
yeah, we
Yeah.
still need that. That law came into effect probably was 6 or 7 years ago, I
Yeah,
think.
it's too bad because in the old days you just have, you can have your ID and just a driver's
Yeah.
license. Yeah.
Although it was always easier for, I mean, I ended up having a passport because it was easier. I have a Nexus card now, which for frequent travelers, you get to skip the line. You get to go to
Nice.
the short line at the airport, and even at the border, because I live so close to the border. Oh my God, it's amazing when you see 20 or 30 cars ahead of you, and there's the Nexus line, and there's two people in line.
Oh, sweet.
Because you're pre-screened, right? So you actually get interviewed by the RCMP, and I'm not sure who it is on the U.S. side, but they actually pre-screen you so that you can go through a little bit faster. And it's often for business people, right, who are crossing the border
Hmm.
regularly.
Oh, I think that's wonderful. Yeah, it comes in handy, I'm sure. So tell us a little bit about the history of Hamilton and the paranormal hotspots. So if somebody was traveling up there, where would they go for some activity?
Well, I mean, Dundurn Castle is a beautiful, gorgeous landmark. It's a beautiful estate that used to greet people as they first entered the city.
Hmm.
And that is not only a beautiful place, it's even associated, if anyone's into the royal family. That's where Charles and Camilla have visited most recently when they've come over to the Toronto Hamilton area.
Hmm.
Um, but the McNabb, the original owner of Dundurn, used to go and play the bagpipes in the middle of the night on the roof of the castle. And often there are stories about hearing the echo of the bagpipes in the middle of the night if you're there at the right time and can hear it. But Dundurn is both beautiful and it can be so eerie because of the history. Across the street from Dundurn were the gallows where traitors from the War of 1812 were hung. And there is now a graveyard in that locale, so that obviously makes makes Dundurn Castle creepy.
Hmm.
I'm a huge, talking about Colorado and Oregon, I'm a huge craft beer fan. So when I travel, I'm always checking out the great breweries.
Mm.
And right downstairs from where I live now in Hamilton is one of the haunted bars that I talk about in Haunted Hamilton called the Winking Judge. And
Mm.
it's on Augusta Street in Hamilton. And the Winking Judge is known for having a cat that is not a live cat, but a ghost of a cat. That occasionally, if you're sitting at one of the tables, you'll feel the cat brush by your legs, and you'll look down, and there's nothing there.
Mm.
And the third floor, which is sealed off, it used to be a home, is allegedly haunted. And occasionally, in the men's bathroom on the second floor, if you look out the window, you sometimes see a man in a stovetop hat and clothing from like 100 years ago where you might see that. Now, fortunately, every time I've been there, all I've seen are drunk people.
Mm.
But that's a fun place to go because not only do you get the craft beer, which is a lot of fun, but you get a sense of the history,
Mm-hmm.
and some of the tales because it is an old house that was converted into a bar.
Mm.
Um, the ruins in Ancaster, the Hermitage ruins, are a great place to go, whether you're going for a hike in the middle of the day or going on one of the Hamilton ghost walks
Mm.
at night, which I did, and it was an absolutely terrifying experience
Oh.
because you get to hear the legend of Lover's Lane, and there's a street nearby called Lover's Lane because that is where a servant wanted to ask the hand of the young maiden who was living in the house, and he went in to ask the master's permission to marry his daughter because he loved her, and he was told no, she's not going to marry down to your class, at which point he hung himself,
Mm.
and the father found him and wanted to hide that shame for his family, so he cut the body down and buried him at the crossroads, of which later became known as Lover's Lane. And of course there are stories about people seeing at night, seeing the shadow of his body hanging from the tree that he hung himself in.
Mm. Wow.
And yeah, there's some other beautiful stories about the ruins themselves that are still partially standing. And Alma Dick Lauder, who was a woman who was fascinated herself of history and ghosts, ended up, and I wrote about her and quoted from one of her books in Haunted Hamilton as she talked about other haunted places. And then she becomes a ghost in a later chapter of the book because she was family of the people who owned the estate, and she was living there, and it burned down mostly, except for the ruins that still stood there. And she ended up living in a tent on the grounds because she couldn't leave the land. That
Mm.
was her family's land, and she loved it so much. And when she died, her spirit is said to be on those grounds because she could never leave them. And my favorite story is of an architect who was in the middle of the afternoon was coming to see the ruins because he had read about this beautiful stately mansion out in the hills in Ancaster,
Mm-hmm.
just outside of Hamilton. And as he's coming up the around the bend and up the hill towards the ruins, he sees this beautiful stately mansion. It's gorgeous. It's fully complete. It is, and he's surprised because he wonders, "Oh my God, the tourist book was wrong. They rebuilt something here, and it's beautiful, and it's exactly the way that it was described in the history books."
Mm.
And he looks and he sees a woman standing in the field, and she's looking at the house, and she turns, she looks at him, she looks back at the house, and both her and the house fade, and nothing is left but the ruins. And he gets the sense that that was Alma Dick Lauder wanting somebody else to see what she saw when she saw those ruins, and that's why she stayed there. And when I heard that story, and it was during one of the ghost walks at the Akbar ruins, I just thought that was one of the most beautiful, touching, yet eerie
Mm-hmm.
ghostly stories about such a beautiful place to visit in Hamilton.
Right, it certainly is. And I've heard a lot of different stories about ghost buildings and ghost structures, and I find that fascinating how people have actually witnessed certain buildings that supposedly appear out of nowhere and then vanish. So I think
I
that's kind
find,
of cool.
yeah, I find that so neat because you usually think of a spirit as a person,
Mm-hmm.
but can a place be a spirit? Can a place be a character?
Right.
And I would argue, yes, of course, the place can be infused with the love and passions of the people who fed into that while they were there.
Right. And is the ghost projecting the image? So it would seem
Yeah,
like it
it's
sometimes.
exactly what, in that case, what she saw. This is what she saw. She didn't
Mm-hmm.
see the ruins. She saw this beautiful, beautiful, stately manor.
Yeah, yeah, that's so incredible. I love it. Yeah, it's very eerie and nice, and there's something about it though. It's a nice positive in a weird, mysterious kind of way.
Yeah.
Some of the spirits there don't seem too miserable, even though they've had traumatic deaths and transitions. It seems like there's a peacefulness about it in some way.
Yeah, yeah, and that I think sometimes ghost stories can give people comfort too.
I think so
Uh,
because that's part of our I mean, we go there, we transfer out at some point in the continuum and move on. So, yeah, kind of get used to that whole transition, I guess. What is the superstition behind burying at the crossroads, if there is one?
Well, I think the crossroads were powerful. Crossroads are where the energies of the universe have come together because a lot of travelers usually meet there, and a lot of intense moments can happen at a crossroads. So the crossroads is known for two key things in sort of in mysticism. That's where you will find the most power. So to perform a spell, the crossroads is the best place to do it because that's where the energies cross and align. They're most powerful there. It's also known as the place where the devil will appear because it's the place on which you can cross over to this plane more easily. And there were a lot of. I wrote a lot of. There was a magazine called Crossroads where the evil dwells, and Pat Nielsen was the editor of this fantastic little, pulpy magazine that all the stories had to have something to do with the crossroads. So I ended up writing a bunch of crossroads specific stories. Like, one of them was a modern day crossroads, which was basically a convenience store, gas station, on a highway. But there's something powerful about that locale.
Yeah, there really is. They say if you bury like a witch there or something, they don't incarnate. Not that they're bad. Obviously, there are good witches too, but I've heard that too. That there, a lot of superstition involving trying
Yeah,
not to resurrect something you don't want.
there's more
So
power
that,
there that can keep them from
right.
coming back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all very fascinating, and we have so much history here that's still not discovered. It's just still cloaked in different frequencies and different areas. Even in America, I mean, I can only imagine with the vastness you guys have with the landscaping that there's so much there that needs to be kind of uncovered, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's fascinating the way you can wrap history up with legend, with fact, and
Hmm.
and get some really amazing tales
Right.
from pretty much anywhere in North America, or actually, I'd say anywhere in the world that you visit. I mean, you think about the U.S. and Canada as having some great richness with history, and then you go overseas and whoa, we're not
Hmm.
just going back 150 years, we're going back hundreds and hundreds of years,
Hmm.
which is always it's always fascinating because you have to think how many more people stood on these crossroads, how many more people lived in this building or this castle or whatever it is.
Hmm. Yeah, it's amazing. Imprint upon imprint. So, what are some of the Canadian superstitions, if any, that you all have up there?
They're very similar. I think the Wendigo might be one that's very Canadian, based on native Canadian. Um, and Wendigo is sort of a creature
Hmm.
um, that lives in the woods. I think it was funny because in the X-Men comic books, they actually had Wendigo as a character that Wolverine fought, and Wolverine, of course, is Canadian. If you think about the Marvel comic books.
Hmm.
Um, there's I think one of the other ones, and again, I go back to indigenous Canadian legends of the trickster spirit, and that does come from the indigenous stories,
Hmm.
where there is a character who is known as the trickster. Think of the trickster like the devil at the crossroads, and the trickster is the one who uh, obviously tricks people the same way that the devil may trick you into a deal, thinking that you're gonna win, but always ends up prospering. And there's a lot of stories like that.
Hmm.
We do have our Sasquatch.
Hmm.
And it was funny when I was doing the research for Spooky Sudbury. I was looking at different creatures like Sasquatch and aquatic creatures as well. And it was funny to see all of these different lakes that apparently had these different legends of creatures,
Mm.
whether it did come from indigenous Canadian stories
Right.
or it was just a story. And I mean, there was a novel I read by Michael Plested that calls upon that, and it's based in not far from Calgary. And it was like a Okapologa, and it was kind of like a version, like a Loch Ness monster, like a Nessie
Mm.
style creature. And it's so fascinating to see all of these local lore coming from different parts of Canada.
Right. Yeah, it's always interesting to look at the superstition behind some of the things and even the history. And we have a lot of that here, but I think it correlates and parallels to some degree. But do you do anything spiritually to protect yourself when you're diving into some of this paranormal and with the ghosts? Do you do anything at all? Do you meditate or
Any
pray or?
any ritual? No, I don't. I will make sure that I surround myself with light,
Hmm.
just to keep the shadows at bay.
Right. Yeah.
I do remember one time when I was working on Haunted Hamilton. It was about 2:30 in the morning. Everybody in my house was asleep. I'm down in the basement in my den. The only lights on in the house are in the den, and I have all the lights in the den. So I have the overhead light, I have the desk lamp, and the other lamp in the den, like just completely brightly lit. And I was putting together the story from some newspaper articles of this ghost of like this old hag kind of ghost that appears floating above the bed of this man and wife, and she keeps appearing. She's got these deep, dark, sunk eye sockets, and it's just this eerie face that appears above them.
Mm.
And there was a sketch of what she looked like, an artist's rendering, and I just kept picturing that sketch. And I closed my eyes, I could just see her. And when I finished writing that chapter, it was time to go to bed because I had to, a few hours sleep before I had to get up for work. And I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave the light. I couldn't go just out into the hall to turn on the light for the hallway to go up the stairs
Hmm.
and to bed. I sat there for a good 40 minutes, shaking, scared, thinking, yeah, I could sleep here in my chair. I'm good. And it was just one of those things. So perhaps I should do some sort of ritual.
So you spooked yourself a little bit, huh?
I sometimes, I was like, I bet you that's going to be a fun chapter because I scared the crap out of
You
myself
are
writing
so
it.
funny. You remember the Ghost of Mr. Chicken?
No.
You don't remember that? Oh my gosh,
No.
you need to watch it. You can find it on YouTube and download it.
The ghost
It's
of
a
the
really old film, but it's about this cowardly. Well, he's not. You're not a coward, but he was like a
Oh, I
chicken,
am. No, I
obviously, and
am.
he was getting nervous around paranormal activity and ghosts. It's a lot. I'm not going to give you the storyline, but it's really cool and it's funny, and I think you'd really enjoy it.
I'm going to have to check that out.
Yeah, it's
Thank
the
you.
Ghost of Mr. Chicken,
Okay,
and
I'm
the
writing
music
that down.
alone is worth it.
Excellent.
Just listening to it for sure. So, have you ever
Speaking of
encountered?
music,
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say,
Don
creepiest
Knotts. Thank you,
story.
Keith. It was Don Knotts as the actor in that. Thank you, Keith.
Oh, Don Knotts. Oh my God, he'd be
Right.
hilarious.
Yeah.
Um, Creepiest music ever. The Teddy Bear Picnic song.
Uh.
Does that not creep you out?
And now that you mention it,
If you go into the woods tonight, you're in for a big
I
surprise.
live
It's
in
like,
the
oh my God.
woods.
Oh, do
I
you?
live outside a forest.
Oh, so the Teddy Bear Picnic is something you're worried about, right?
Oh, yeah, now I am. That's great. Yeah, I'll have to tune that in again. Funny. Have you ever encountered the shadow people or
In my
shadowy
imagine
figures or
in,
anything? Yeah.
in my imagination, all the time,
Hmm.
all the time. They're right there. Just I can just barely make them out when I look over into the corner right now. And that's the thing I think that drives me to write scary stuff is
Yeah.
when I look in a dark shadow, I wonder what's there that I can't see. I wonder what's there that can come out of the shadow, or if I turn my back to it, is it going to creep that much closer to me?
Mm, that's very well said. That sounds like part of your book.
No, just part of my life, apparently, actually. So I just end up
Oh,
writing that into the works.
yeah, there's a thin line between psychic perception and imagination, too. And I'm wondering if you're just blocking your psychic ability and you perceive it and interpolate it as imagination.
Oh, that would be good. Yeah, that would be good. Yeah.
Wondering about that just because you have you're fascinating to me. Your mind is incredible. I really enjoyed talking to you tonight. And by the way, we're getting ready to wrap this up pretty soon. So before we wrap this up, I do want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been incredible and so magical, especially considering Halloween's around the corner and Samhain, as we call it. So let everybody know how they can get in touch with you and your books and how they can pick up your books and all that good stuff.
Sure. Well, www.markleslie.ca. You can check me out on Twitter at Mark Leslie. You can also find I'm on Pinterest. You can actually find Barnaby Bones has his own Pinterest page, so you can see all the places he has traveled with me. You can check me out on all of the book sites, Amazon and Kobo and Barnes and Noble and iBooks, and Chapters Indigo in Canada, and Wattpad as well, wattpad.com. You can pretty much read at least 2 or 3 full-length novels of mine completely for free. if you just want to enjoy them. But thank you so much for having me on. It's been great to be back.
Oh, it's wonderful to have you on. It's always a real treat when I hear from you. And I must keep tabs on you more so because you're writing and writing, and I have to keep up with your books. My goodness.
I have to
Yeah.
try and keep up with myself too.
Oh my goodness. And Barnaby Bones. Now, where did you get that name?
There was an old TV detective called Barnaby Jones. Do you
Right, I
remember him?
remember. Oh yeah.
And so when I got him, I thought, well, Barnaby is a good name for a skeleton, and if I had to give him a last name, I'm like, well, Barnaby Bones rolls off the tongue quite nicely.
Oh, it certainly does. Yeah. And where does he sleep at night?
He's actually in my car. He's
All
in
the
my car.
time?
Yeah, all the time. Now I do actually have a second one in my apartment, a second Barnaby. So I bought an additional one. Got him from Costco.
Nice.
Uh, and yeah, so I have the Barnaby in my apartment for the apartment shots or for the interior pictures that I take with him, and then the Barnaby on the road is in the passenger seat of my car.
That's awesome. So if people want to pick up a skeleton like that, they can actually purchase one?
Yeah, I got the 6 foot or yeah 5'11" skeleton at Costco. In Canada, Costco's had them for the last couple Halloween, so you usually have to get them now before they sell out. That's what last two Halloweens I bought one. I went, oh, I should get another one.
Nice. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I like that little, I guess it's a prop in some way, but he's also a personality too.
Oh, he's very much personality.
Yeah, he's adorable. I love it. Yeah, I love that picture you have with him. So what about banshees? What's your impression of those?
Banshees?
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I mean, the howling spirits.
Yeah, associated
Um.
usually with certain families in Ireland, I believe.
Yeah. So I don't know a lot about them. The thought of the howling, the spirit that is, it kind of reminds me of a storm in spirit form.
Hmm.
That is just so powerful and so intense is kind of intimidating and a little bit too scary for me.
Hmm.
So I haven't I haven't dug into the Banshee legends all that much yet. But there's always next time.
Right. And what about tree spirits? Have you done much work with the tree spirits?
No, but that's one that fascinates me.
Me too.
Yeah. So how do you
Well, I see faces in trees. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people do too, but there's always a presence and an energetic associated with a lot of different forests and trees. And I was just curious insofar as if you've ever written about that, the mystery behind it.
No, I haven't, and it's something that has long fascinated me because I mean, all life has energy. I mean, all life, whether you think of it as sentient or conscious, there's an energy associated with it. I mean, I always, I've made the joke about, oh, I can't cut the lawn because I can't stand the sound of the screaming of the blades of grass as I cut them down.
Hmm.
But I mean, I say that jokingly, but I think about this is life in a different form. And just because it's not one that we recognize or can speaks back to us in any manner that we're used to, doesn't mean that it's not a life. And so that has always fascinated me. That thought of trees and plant life in general.
I agree. It's all connected. It's all the web of life, even the clouds, the natural cloud formations. But I do want to thank you again. We're getting ready to wrap this up. We've got about 2 minutes left here. And before, thank you so much, Mark. I do wish you a happy Halloween, by the way, and hope you guys get spooked in a good way, in a happy way.
Yes, thank you
Yeah.
very much.
And I do want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. I hope you appreciate the information. I had a great time, and I'm sure you all did too. And please stay tuned for Researcher on a Mission with Dr. J. He has a fantastic show coming up here on Dark Matter Radio Network for sure. And let's see here. So we've got everything. Let's for one more. I think just for the few minutes or few seconds we have left, let's go ahead and give a rundown as far as how people can contact you again.
Sure. Check me out on Twitter at Mark Leslie. You can check me out, mark at markleslie.ca is my email, and markleslie.ca, where you can link to my blog and find all kinds of wonderful things out about me, including my buddy Barnaby.
Exactly. And you're also on Facebook.
Facebook, I have a Mark Leslie author page, which is basically facebook.com/Mark Leslie. And yeah, it's all fun stuff, and I love interacting with people and sharing stories. You can check me out on Goodreads as well. There's an author page there, and I'm happy to interact with folks in any way that they want to share some fun tales. So yeah, I really look forward to that. And if anyone has haunted stories, particularly bookstores, libraries, I'm doing hospitals next.
Ooh.
Contact me. I'd love to hear some tales and see if maybe we can get that into the next book.
Wow, hospitals. That would be interesting. Are you talking about insane asylums and sanitariums, or?
All kinds of institutions. So yeah, we could probably use haunted hospitals for the title, but then use the all of the institutions like that, hospitals, insane asylums, lots of places with lots of interesting stories.
Wow, that would be interesting. What about cemeteries? Have you gone there yet? Haunted cemeteries?
That's a good one. But
Hmm.
you know, as I said, I'm a little bit too scared to
All
go
right,
walking
you.
there alone.
I'll come over and visit.
Thanks. That
I,
that would be awesome.
I'm
Bring a candle.
serious. Yes, I will. I'll watch your back. No worries. But what about a screenplay? I still think you should put something into a documentary or film. I'd love to see all this on film in some way. I hope you do
That would
that
be
at
a
some
lot of
point.
fun. Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank
for
you very
sure.
much.
Yeah, certainly will. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in, and have a great week. And thanks again, Mark. And thank you, Keith.